All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Steve Malzberg Show. We're going to be taking your calls in the next segment at 877-NEWSMAX, 877-NEWSMAX. So you could start dialing now, but don't miss any of this. We're going to welcome in Stephen Miller, Senior Policy Advisor for the Trump campaign. Stephen, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here. As you know, we had a very successful week in the delegate count and in the state victories. And, of course, a very, very historic win in Florida.
Absolutely. And speaking of Florida, I want to get this. This is breaking today. Marco Rubio saying, A, he's not interested in being anybody's vice president. B, he's going to not try to reseek this Senate seat that he gave up. He'll serve it out and then go to the private sector for now. But C, he had this to say.
I mean, I think that's going to happen now that the race is narrowed even further. And hopefully there's time to still, prevent a Trump nomination, which I think would fracture the party and be damaging to the conservative movement.
Are you surprised that he's saying this now?
I am. Now, I want to be careful to answer not surprised, disappointed is a better word, but I want to be careful to be very diplomatic because obviously, there's a lot of Rubio supporters, a lot of voters out there who've cast ballots for him, and we welcome them to our team, and we welcome their votes, and we encourage them to vote for us. So I'll try and answer diplomatically, and I'll just make this point, which is that if you look at the discontent of most Republican voters, it is driven by policy disagreements between voters and donors/leaders. I'll rattle off a few. We would like, as voters, to have a trade policy that keeps manufacturing jobs in the United States. Donors and leaders have pushed for offshoring of U.S. jobs. On immigration policy, we'd like a policy that prioritizes jobs and wages for Americans first. Donors, the consultant class, the DC class, whatever you want to call it, have been pushing policies that flood the labor market and drive down wages. And I would just note that much of this discontent really began growing profoundly in 2013 when 8 senators got together, and what did they do? They defied the will of every single GOP voter to try and push through the biggest amnesty bill in history. So it's just interesting, I'll say, it's interesting to be diagnosing voter discontent when you're one of those 8 senators.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. Let me ask you about going forward. Now you have all these stories day after day, Stephen. It seems like every day there's a meeting somewhere between the Republican establishment who want to knock off Donald Trump, who want to stop Donald Trump, who are plotting and planning to stop Donald Trump. Now we're having Bill Kristol, who was a regular guest on the show, and I respect him, but I disagree with him, talking about a third party or third candidate, I don't even know what party it would be, running if Donald Trump's the nominee. To me, any of those scenarios, taking it away from Donald Trump if he's just a few delegates short, giving it to someone else, running a third candidate against Donald Trump, that just means President Hillary Clinton if she's not indicted.
Well, I would say this. Never in my life, and people older than me could probably say never in their lives, have they ever seen a political party so afraid of growing. I mean, we're talking about being able to compete in Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, states where the GOP historically has had a very hard time winning. And the way we're going to do that is by reaching these blue-collar voters. So it's just amazing to see all these people terrified of growing the party. But what's really happening here is that, and I won't name specific names, but I worked in Washington for 10 years. What's really happening here is it's not about people disagreeing with Donald Trump. It's about people worried the gravy train is going to get cut off. While the economy's been terrible out there for many of your listeners, it's been great for the political class in Washington, D.C. I know because I've worked with these people. And they're worried about the gravy train getting shut down. And that's what we're seeing.
Let me ask you about comments and media coverage. The media coverage of the violence was reprehensible. What was even more reprehensible was the other three Republican candidates joining in with Sanders and Hillary and condemning Donald Trump for the left-wing violence. But now he made this statement. I want you to hear it.
I think we'll win before getting to the convention, but I can tell you, if we didn't, and if we're 20 votes short, or if we're 100 short, and we're at 1,100 and somebody else is at 500 or 400, because we're way ahead of everybody, I don't think you can say that we don't get it automatically. I think you'd have riots. I think you'd have riots.
All right. Now, the media is saying Donald Trump is calling for riots.
Well, yes, obviously that's a well-known figure of speech, and I think the media understands that, and they're just trying to be sensational. But I'm glad you brought this topic up, because there's one point that I did want to make about this, which is that when there were the violent protests in Chicago, and by now a lot of your listeners have probably seen some of the YouTube videos, maybe they've seen pictures of the flyers that were handed out to organize the violent disruptions, maybe they've seen the photo of the bloodied police officer. But when that happened, it was a moment where the other campaigns had a chance to do the right thing for America. And it was very revealing that Ted Cruz and John Kasich blamed conservatives for left-wing violence. That is outrageous. Any of us who followed these disruptions over the years, whether it's people shouting down Condoleezza Rice, or shouting down Ann Coulter, or shouting down any number of different figures in the conservative constellation, anybody who would blame the person exercising free speech and not the disruptor has a very skewed compass.
All right, Stephen, I want to get this in. Do you see Donald Trump getting together down the road here with either Kasich or Cruz, combining delegates to assure him the nomination? Is that possible?
I think at this point, we're just focused on winning the 1237. And that's going to be my message, and that's going to be our focus. And if you look at where we are right now, and you may have seen the Drudge banner the other day, and there was a New York Times article about the path to 1237, and we're entering a section of the race where you have a lot of huge states that are going to be very favorable to Mr. Trump.
I
Like
understand that.
New Jersey.
I understand that. But is it out of the question? Do you rule it out?
There's nothing to rule in. There's nothing to rule out. You're going to try and get as many delegates as you possibly can. You're going to try and get the 1237,
right.
And then you get to the convention and you see where you are. I certainly am not today going to lay out scenario A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, because right now we're in a good position, a great position, to get to 1237.
All right, Stephen Miller, thank you. I hope you'll come back soon, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.